Good evening, everyone. I'm calling to order September 17th, 2020, Cheshire Board of Education opening of schools meeting. Mr. Zelinski, we have a roll for quorum.
Mr. Gribbo?
Here.
Ms. Allen?
Here.
Ms. Ham? Ms. Harrigan?
Here.
Mr. Martelli?
Here.
Mr. Perugini?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Carol. I ask the board please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Before we get started, do we have a motion to amend the agenda this evening?
Sure. I would like to move to add executive session to discuss union negotiations to agenda item number 10.
Thank you, Ann. Is there a second? Is seconded. The motion is we move to add executive session to discuss negotiations to agenda item number 10. All those in favor? Aye is unanimous. It passes. Thank you. And for those watching, if anybody, hopefully there's quite a few tonight. We like the 200 numbers that we've been seeing in these meetings lately online. So we added that because the agenda that was posted earlier this week did not have executive session at the end of the agenda, but we do have an updated discuss for the board, so we had to add it this evening. Thank you for bearing with us on that. Having said that, welcome. And Jeff, Marlene, we're going to turn over to you for the presentation of opening a school.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perugini. I'm just going to step to the microphone here, if you don't mind. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening and for all of your incredible flexibility during this really challenging time. It's a pretty lengthy PowerPoint tonight, given the very unique nature of the situation. In spite of editorializing over there, I will try my best to go through this as quickly as possible. Starting with the fact that, this has been a summer like no other. We had to absolutely redefine everything that we do within the school system. And, you don't necessarily think about a lot of these things when you think about coming back to school, but they're all elements of our school day that had to be absolutely redressed given the COVID-19 situation. So we will get into some detail on many of these items tonight, but as I said, in the interest of time, we'll just kind of move along. With that, I want to pass this off to our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Massiana, who will cover much of what we did during the summer and how that impacts our daily school life now that we've started up. Mr. Massiana? Hold our applause, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. In the interest of time, I will move this along as quickly as I possibly can, which by a lot of people's definition is kind of slow. But this summer was no different in that we did have summer projects that were funded through our capital budget. And you'll see here, there's a picture of the 10,000-gallon underground oil storage tank that was removed at Darcy this summer. Whenever we remove an oil storage tank, there's quite a bit of environmental testing that has to be done. And I'm happy to report that there was no contamination from this tank. We only have one remaining tank that needs to be removed next year, and that's over at Doolittle. So we've knocked off this project over the last 3 summers. Darcy will be heated by propane going forward, so we will not have an underground oil storage tank to have to worry about in 30 years from now. At the high school, if you've been by the high school, you'll see that the front lot, the driveway have been repaved. We also recarpeted 7,000 square feet of carpeting in the library. This is a picture of the high school window replacement project. That project is just about complete. They, due to COVID, there was a delay in the awning windows. Actually, you could see there those plywood sections. Those will be replaced, and the blinds will be installed by early October. So that is a project that we were looking forward to getting started on. Those windows are low E and they're double pane, so that will improve the comfort in those rooms both when it's hot and when it's cold. It's not a great picture, I suppose, other than this is the inside of the new Highland government freezer that was completed over the summer. And you could see that there's some shelving, cheese, fruit, chicken, turkey. So the Highland government freezer serves as a central storehouse for the items that we receive primarily from the USDA. We get about $100,000 worth of product every year, and our food service director, Madeline Diker, decides what product that we're going to basically get and use in our schools over the course of the year. So this was an important project for us. This summer, we also completed the new office trailer that was installed at the bus depot that was actually funded by DACO under their contract. So we're happy that work has been done. The old trailer has been removed. We also finished the video surveillance system camera installations, and that was about a 3-year project. So those are done. We've exhausted all the funds that we had available for that. We may ask for more to do additional camera installations. And then the last thing I put on the list there was funded through the capital budget is the Cheshire High School stadium lighting, which we're converting to LED. Everything is in place except some of the components due to COVID were delayed. So that project will probably be completed in the late fall. Since football is being, canceled for the fall, I don't think it presents a huge problem, and there is still lighting at the field. It's just the old lighting. Beyond the summer capital funded projects, these are the typical, maintenance and repair projects that we do. You could read it, but I will highlight that the first item on the list, the detailed cleaning of all schools, normally that is a job that is done by our cleaning contractor. But because of the school being shut down, we were able to use our internal building maintainer staff to do all that summer cleaning. And they started doing it during the period that students were not in school, which was from March through June. So that saved us a little over $100,000. That was planned for when we prepared our final budget. And then you could see that there's a laundry list of things that we typically do. We paint, we do playground inspections. We'll do the annual maintenance on the emergency generator at the high school. We inspect the Cheshire High School utility tunnels to make sure that, we have no water coming into those tunnels, to stay ahead of that. Tree pruning and removal, fence repairs, those types of things. Then also across the district, we did some district-wide projects like catch basin rebuilds and cover replacements. We did duct cleaning, primarily at Cheshire High School. We replaced exterior doors and side lights over at the high school loading dock. And we did some asphalt patching, and we did line striping, things like that. And then this is a list of school-specific items that we completed over the summer. Chapman, we replaced the handicap stair lift that's over by the main entrance. Bunch of door lighting and other projects. We did a lot of work this summer, obviously, as we do every summer. What I really wanted to spend the next couple of minutes on, because this was new for this summer, and I'm calling it the COVID-19 preparedness. So to get ready for this school year, as Dr. Solon explained, this was a summer like no other. So there were tasks that we added that we normally wouldn't do. The first couple of items I want to mention: one, in order to create additional space in our classrooms and in our buildings in general, we were able to take furniture and equipment and move it into storage. And so that created additional classroom space so that we could maximize the social distancing between the desks that are in our classrooms. We also installed tents at all our buildings except Cheshire High School and Humiston. We didn't need to do it at Cheshire High School because remember, Cheshire High School is in hybrid mode, so only 50% of the students are in the building on any given day. So there's enough room to spread out when we use the gyms in particular. But we have about 30,000 square feet of tents installed. Those are being used very successfully at the elementary schools and at Dodd. Dodd's tent is 7,200 square feet. So we're able to spread out primarily to do lunch, but it's also being used for mass breaks underneath those tents. The tents, I'll just caveat, come November, it's going to probably be too cold to use those tents. So, we'll have to move those students back into the building and figure some other strategies. But, that was certainly a good solution to get us through the first 2 months of school. The other thing I want to highlight is, there's a lot of guidance that has been issued by the state, by CDC, by our local health department, things that, you have to familiarize yourself, with the guidance, and then you have to implement the guidance. So these are just some of the highlights. It's not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more than this that, has been done and that we're continuing to deal with. But some examples at transportation, even though our buses can accommodate 71 students or more, we have some larger buses that'll accommodate 80. All our routes were mapped to 50 students or less per bus, so that we could at least not have more than 2 students, per seat. The state guidance did say that you could run your buses at full capacity, but we were able to not do that and plan the route successfully. And by the way, we didn't add additional buses to do that. One of the ways we were able to accomplish that is that we did have several hundred parents who signed an opt-out form, so we were able to remove those students from the route. The Mass Police have been hired, and basically these are bus monitors that get on the bus in the morning at 6:30 and then, in the afternoon for the runs in the afternoon. The goal there was to make sure that students are compliant with the mask wearing. That's why I call them the Mask Police. But I will say that the students have been terrific, not only on the buses, but, generally speaking, in the classrooms and at school. So the plan was to have the bus monitors ride those buses for the first 2 to 3 weeks of school. We did have some difficulty getting those bus monitors. So we don't have one bus, one monitor per bus per day. So they're being rotated very successfully. The bus drivers are very grateful. They feel that, they're able to continue their focus on the road while the bus monitors are focusing on the students. But that's worked out very, very well. And then we are disinfecting after the morning runs are done and after the afternoons are run. Afternoon runs are completed. All the seats and the high-touch surfaces on the buses are being disinfected. Again, part of the state's guidance. We hired day porters in all of our buildings to basically go through the building during the course of the day, sanitize or disinfect all the high-touch surfaces, including the bathrooms. So there's one in each of our buildings, and that started as of August 31st. Their only job is to do sanitizing and disinfecting. They're not there as an added resource for building maintenance. They're solely focused on trying to stay on top of this disinfecting that has to be done. And although the state wasn't very specific on what needed to be done, we gave very specific instructions to the day porters. They are hired through Performance Environmental, which does our building cleaning. And then we added to the nightly cleaning that was always done additional disinfecting duties. So we're disinfecting all the high-touch surfaces, including student desks, every night in our schools. that is an add-on that was done once a week. But with COVID, we're doing it nightly by the cleaning contractor. And beyond that, and I think you'll see that maybe in the next slide, we also provided product inside our schools so that the teachers, and in the case of the high school, the students can wipe down with products to either sanitize or disinfect. We've added across the district signage, floor decals, to try and encourage people to keep their 6-foot distance at all time. We stamped some of our sidewalks with markings 6 feet apart. Some of them are kind of clever, maintain your 6, that kind of a thing. We've added acrylic shields in all the high traffic areas, like the offices and the nurses areas, the library circulation desks. HVAC there was quite a bit of guidance that came from the state. So we did have all our mechanical systems, and not every building, in fact, only 3 buildings have true air conditioning systems. Most of the rest of the buildings, have, at a minimum ventilation systems, but not all buildings do. And even our windows, they've been inspected and repaired to the extent we can. Some of the windows are so old you can't get repair parts. As part of the state's guidance, you're supposed to start up your air circulating systems 2 hours before occupancy. We're doing that. We've upgraded the filters where there are filters to be upgraded to MERV 13, so it will remove finer particles out of the air. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that we did hire Collier's Facility Engineering to conduct further reviews, of all our mechanical, heating, and cooling systems. In line with the state's guidance, we've provided HEPA filtration units for the nurses' offices and the isolation rooms. Isolation rooms have been set up in all the buildings in accordance with the state's guidance, so that if a student is reporting some type of symptoms, they have to go into an isolation room. And we also had to hire isolation monitors for each of those rooms. So that's been done. HEPA filters are recommended just for those rooms. They're not recommended for classrooms, in line with the state's guidance. So, again, we've done everything that we possibly could to, meet the guidance and exceed the guidance to the extent that we could. Some other things, school meals are being served, but everything is streamlined and prepackaged. So it's not the traditional lunch line where you go and you select your food. We're prepackaging the meals. We converted to a scan to purchase instead of having students punch in their ID into a PIN pad. We've also, on the technology side, we've increased the bandwidth that we have available because we know we're doing more video streaming. That's been an area that we've been struggling with a little bit with Google Meet. It's more of a Google issue than a network issue, but we're trying to deal with these problems as they come up, and so far we're doing okay. Some days are better than others, so we are making some further upgrades to the Google licensing we have in an effort to get higher priority when items aren't working as well as they can. And we do have quite a few students that are remote, so this is an important task for us. And the broadcast classrooms are up and running across the school district, which we've talked about. Providing PPE and cleaning products for our staff. This was a huge focus, and it still is a huge focus for us. What we had to do, and I'm just going to note because I think this is important, but we've appointed a district PPE coordinator, and each school has its own PPE coordinator, so that if there's a product that's needed, the PPE's coordinator's job is to, look at the inventory. As we get a couple of weeks into school, we'll be able to better predict what the needs are. So, my operations assistant is the district PPE coordinator, and pretty much that's all she's been doing for the last 4 weeks. And you see a picture there of some of the items that we have stocked, in our undisclosed location where we keep our PPE. Some of the PPE is very difficult to get, sanitizing and disinfecting wipes in particular are hard to get. Hand sanitizer is a little bit easier to get right now. Masks we have plenty of, face shields we've got enough of right now. Disposable gowns, those we're able to get pretty easily. The other thing that I wanted to mention is cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. You'll see that, this is highlighted. This is great, it's not going to work. So we're going to skip that. But, part of what we've done is not only have we trained our building maintainers, but we've had to educate our staff as well on, the difference between cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. Cleaning is what you typically would do with soap and water. It does reduce the number of germs. Sanitizing, you can do with soap and water. There are some diluted products that will sanitize. Sanitizing generally reduces the number of germs, and which is okay. So if you just sanitize a surface, it reduces the number of germs on that surface. And at times that's all you should be doing. On things like gym equipment, you don't want to disinfect. You can't disinfect constantly. Disinfecting is typically harsh chemicals. So there's a big difference between sanitizing and disinfecting. Disinfecting kills germs. There's no doubt that's the best thing you could do, but there's an appropriate time to do it. And then we have also spent a lot of time not only educating, ourselves, but trying to educate, our staff on, what type of products should we be using. I did bring, some of my favorite items. I didn't bring them, to the podium right now. I'll spare you the details, but we did find some excellent wipes in a very limited supply we were able to get through our cleaning contractor called Oxivir TB, used in hospitals. The great thing about it is it's hydrogen peroxide based. You'd need no PPE when you use it, so no gloves, no mask, no respiratory. It's got a 1-minute contact kill time for COVID. Just very difficult to get. So we've taken whatever inventory we had, and we sent it to the high school, because at the high school, students are moving between classes, and using the same desks. So the students are wiping down right now using the Oxivir wipes. If we can continue to get those, we will. Great product. Absent that, this week we received another product called EnviroCleanse A. Very safe product to use. It'll sanitize. You wipe it down from a spray bottle, so it's not a wipe. The only difference is it's got a 10-minute contact time to kill COVID. So you have to use the application appropriate with the contact time. And so we've been sending out procedures. We have posted to all our employees a product list of the products that are used and can be used safely by students, staff, and then there's the products that are used by our building maintainers and then our professional cleaners. So we spent a lot of time. We're trying to do this right. We don't want to put any kind of a disinfectant into somebody's hands that's going to hurt them. And so, where it's appropriate, we've opted to just provide some basic sanitizing wipes that are alcohol-based or some other mild product-based. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massiana. As I say thank you to Mr. Massiana, I just want to, again, take a moment.
Yeah, just quick.
Sure.
The buses right now, do you have any expectation as to whether the bus ridership would change? Have you gotten any feedback from parents or anything like that?
It's kind of early. I do expect the bus ridership will go up, assuming that the infection rate stays low, and I think there'll be a sense of comfort. This is my speculation. There'll be a sense of comfort, and students will get back on the bus. And any parent that wants to add a child to the bus, all they have to do is contact our transportation department, and we're going to do that as quickly as we possibly can, usually a day.
Thank you.
Sure. I, again, just want to thank all of our parents and students who've been so flexible. This is a different world than they're used to. And I appreciate the trust they've put in us to keep their children safe, and that we are going to, work as diligently as we can to make an education that's as normal as we possibly can. More importantly, though, as it relates to preparations for the opening of school, there are so many people who had to just do incredibly different things than they ever have. That, of course, continues, but the preparation dating back to June, July, when we had, our team together to try and create the reopening of schools, but IAs, food service, teachers, of course, maintenance professionals, nurses, secretaries, technology specialists. I mean, we have technology specialists working over the weekend, bringing their spouse in to help, clone computers. And I mean, people have just gone so far out of their way. And our administrative team, all of these folks have engaged in a Herculean effort. And without them, we could not have reopened schools the way that we have. And the 3-day orientation process, all the preparation that they put into that, really, I think, helped ease our students and staff into this. It hasn't made it, quote, easier, but we're trying to normalize it as much as possible. And, I just want to thank all of these groups again, our administrative team all summer long, our entire group. And thank you all of our staff members for what you've done for our students and community, and of course, each other. So school opening, convocation, we, as you know, have, at least our board members realize, we have a generally very invigorating, edutainment, we call it. We try and make it really engaging for folks to come and enjoy the day. Vin gave his own QVC episode with PPE, and you guys missed that this evening. But a couple of the marquee events are really the naming of the Instructional Assistant of the Year. That's something that we started last year, and Esther Harvey is a beloved instructional assistant, and we were proud to honor her, as well as our Teacher of the Year, Deb Mankey. I really encourage anybody who's watching to visit our website and look for Teacher of the Year. You can hear her speech there. It's really powerful, and I think it'll help you understand why she was our Teacher of the Year. Really great stuff. So typically what we do is go through the school by school reports and kind of give an overview of the opening of school and how it went. Every time you go to Darcy, it's just like this Honey, I Shrunk the Kids moment for me, and it's really a lot of fun to see the kids arriving at school and all the wonder and excitement that they have to show up for their first days of preschool or kindergarten. It's really great stuff. But you can see that, even for our youngest students, things look much different with masks and taped off areas. And so we had projected through the New England School Development Council, NESDEC, last year to have 64 students in kindergarten at Darcy. We have 62, so pretty close to projected. At Chapman, you'll see that tape on desks in a lot of places, kids spaced out differently, and a teacher teaching remotely to students there with no mask on. But here's the arrival. We've all become much better, I'm sure, socially at reading eyes, and a lot of smiling eyes through those masks. It was a lot of fun on the first day of school. And so we were projected for 330 total students at Chapman, and have 323 enrolled. Doolittle, so in our Doolittle enrollment, we had a projection of 469 students with 437 students enrolled. At Highland, we had really kind of an anomaly here. 713 students projected, and 760 students enrolled. So, we're not quite sure what happened. I know that, across Connecticut, there's been a real demand for real estate. There were no new developments built or anything, but apparently there was a little bit more turnover in the Highland residential area, and it really shows in our enrollment at that elementary school. It's pretty,
Explain that. Colliers, I know you guys were last night for SMC meeting,
yeah,
but Charles Colliers explained that the turnover of housing stock was a big driver of Cheshire. So I'm not surprised by that.
yeah. And I love to tongue in cheek kind of say people don't move here for the nightlife, and you can see it in our school enrollment. Norton School, another exciting opening. I think everybody was so enthusiastic about returning to school, even if we weren't doing a lot of our traditional pomp and circumstance, like with countdowns and things like that, and kazoos and the usual stuff that we do. But it was still really, it was just special this year to see each other, and that was a really great part of our opening day. 430 students projected at Norton, with 405 arriving. You can see what it typically does there to the class size, even 25 students across 7 grades. It really doesn't move the class size average all that much. The middle school level at Dodd. See folks outside under the tent. So our enrollment at Dodd, the 631 projected, 629 actual. So pretty much right on. Cheshire High, giving out senior shirts, rite of passage, very exciting. Our Link Crew team helping freshmen kind of find their way. And 1,392 projected and 1,395 enrolled. So pretty good size, still building. Our overall enrollment summary, a total K-12 enrollment of 4,030 was projected, 4,011. Now the projections arrived well before COVID. As you know, we build the projections in January when we're writing our budget. So there were actually 32 students who elected to engage in homeschooling due to COVID. They declared that specifically. So actually we would be a little bit above projected, which is a shift for us and moving, north in terms of our enrollment. So interesting, kind of like Chuck from Colliers was saying. Part of this presentation has to include an approval of our strategic plan. The strategic plan was originally drafted to include things like our mission statement, which I will reiterate. The Cheshire Public Schools, in partnership with families in the community, will prepare all students to meet the challenges of an ever-changing global society by providing high-quality educational opportunities that inspire lifelong learning and service to others. So our strategic initiatives were initially created in 2011. It was designed to be applied through 2021. I know, as far back as last December, you heard me talking about, this year would be a year that we would review that and kind of move forward. Now, right now, we're in a little bit of survival mode, but our intention is to review our initiatives and move forward at the end of this year to plan strategic initiatives for coming years. Now, I'll talk a little bit about Vuca later, but the world has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. I went into a class at Dodd today. They were talking about self-driving cars, and a student indicating he had ridden in one. And I asked the students, 8th graders at Dodd, how many of you think by the time you graduate, the cars will be driving themselves? And a lot of hands went up. The world is changing at an incredible pace. And so I think our strategic initiatives will likely not last us 11 years. And really, frankly, when you see them, a lot of them will be more like goals that we have, as opposed to perhaps vision and we'll talk a little bit about that throughout the year. Many of the initiatives we had have been fulfilled. We reviewed them in 16, 17 when I was hired, and we went through a lot of work with the community, and that has really sharpened and focused where we are directed. And I'll talk a little bit about that too. So these are the initial initiatives that cover a number of key elements within the school system, curriculum being one of them. Talks about, Common Core state standards. Remember, these were written in 2011, most of them. Instructional strategies. Again, we now focus very much on complex thinking, which Marlene will talk about, which shifts our instructional strategies. Student work. An emphasis on the Cheshire performance standards, which are still relevant. That was really forward thinking in 2011 and is still an important component of what we do because we are no longer really focused as much on content as we are skills. Assessment and evaluation. Technology. Think about how much technology has changed in the last 11 years, 10 years. Personalized learning, that was revised or added in 2014, I think. And as you know, we did a lot of work with our committee last year to take a look at that. So the Cheshire performance standards, again, we talk about why this is critical. These are really aspirations that are skill-based and not necessarily knowledge-based. When in 2016-17, when we reviewed everything with the committee, we used to have knowledgeable person as one of our performance standards. And when I went to PTO meetings and met with business leaders and students, and we kind of assessed which one of these do you think is most critical for the class of 2020. At that time, those were the students that were starting in kindergarten or had started in kindergarten. No, 4 years later, I guess. I don't even know what year it is anymore, but they said it was the class of 2030, excuse me, and they were saying knowledgeable person was least important already. It is important to have knowledge. I don't want to discount that, but these skills are super critical for our kids, and we're still very much focused on them. So the direction of our schools, I know you've seen this many times. We are focused on complex thinking and social emotional learning. This is an area where, we're not really willing to negotiate. We are focused on these things. As a community, we've developed this. We're going to take another look at it. And does this need to be adjusted? And we're going to talk about really some of the dividends that have paid off in that process. But to talk and go a little bit deeper into social emotional learning and complex thinking, I'm going to ask our Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Solano, to try and elaborate on some of those things. I think you can from that mic. Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. I'd like to start out by mentioning that the
You
presentation.
may just want to remove your mic or mask for this part of it.
Can you hear me okay now? Okay.
Better,
Better?
but project.
Okay. So regarding social emotional learning, I wanted to remind folks that originally we had talked about having the State Education Resource Center come and do a presentation about the work that will be involved with them this year. And we have moved that to our next curriculum committee meeting, where we will more thoroughly address our comprehensive plan for social justice and equity work. So I really see that as something that's falling in line with our social emotional learning plan. For this year, the additional things that we are going to continue to work on are building capacity of our K-12 staff. Specifically in this instance, our support staff. We had trained hall monitors and study hall monitors from the high school this year in both trauma-informed practices that relate to restorative practice. So that is helping to get that message out to all of our staff. In addition, we are supporting new teachers with SEL coaching. That was done for our elementary teachers during the new teacher orientation, where they worked with one of our consultants on effective classroom strategies, as well as our secondary new hires were also working separately on restorative practices. So we see that as building our capacity and making sure that the reach goes out to all of the adults in our district who work with children. We are going to continue to work with our elementary schools on strengthening those responsive classroom practices. That's something that's really infused through faculty meetings and through grade level meetings. And as I mentioned the other night at curriculum, we had a day devoted to social emotional learning and how we would use all of these tools that we've been exposed to help during this pandemic, right? Especially when you think about how traumas impact students and student learning, and that for many students, in some ways, this was a trauma for folks. So we want to be very cognizant of that. So the middle and high school is doing that through their work with restorative practice, and also continuing our work at Darcy in looking at student behavior through an attachment lens and looking at the whole child. We also continue to use Ruler and the practices down at Yale by Dr. Mark Brackett. Complex thinking, as the slide indicates, is one of our marquee issues. It's something that we continue to work on, and we really feel that if we have a strategic and systemic alignment of our curriculum, instruction, assessment, and our PD, and we have the resources around complex thinking, then our instructional practice will demonstrate that. And basically what all of this is saying is that as a result, student achievement will increase. And so we have certainly seen that pay off by a number of measures. If we move on to the next slide, this is some complex thinking strategies that we have developed through our implementation of learning walks. And while our learning walks have been paused, we still continue to work on effective questioning, applying learning, using rich literature text and nonfiction text to compare issues and to use that to solve real world problems. I know that particularly our social studies department has been working on how students can take informed action by taking their education and what they're learning to apply it to situations in real life and in their own lives as well. We're also brainstorming ways for teachers to share strategies. So while it may not look the same way, that learning walks looked, I was at Norton today. I'm not sure what that even is, why it's doing that. Yeah. Because that's not really my phone. So I was at Norton today and we were talking about, and Anne, you could relate to this from what you saw at Chapman the other day, seeing teachers teaching the in-person and remote students, and that we want to be able to build capacity around that as well. And wouldn't it be great to have a teacher come in and watch that happening for those people who have adapted to it really well and flawlessly, so that we could build capacity around that. So that sort of ties into those complex thinking strategies that we're working towards.
Thank you, Marlene. So, we mentioned some of the dividends of our work. We have received many honors, and I lead with this slide because it's not just our academic achievement. We don't have transcripts that graduate. We graduate students and people. And so it is important that we have a well-rounded experience for our students, to include arts and athletics, and focusing on creativity and things that aren't necessarily always readily measured through standardized assessment. But our drive is also to develop the skills in our students that they can be successful in pretty much anything that they tackle, whether it be standardized assessment or other problems such as demonic possession of cell phones or whatever Marlene was just dealing with. But we really want our students to be able to solve problems and be creative thinkers. Nevertheless, we've had tremendous success academically. 33-point gain on the average CHS SAT score. I know there was a lot of angst about, if you look at the College Board website, our next day for a scheduled SAT was September 26th. That's a Saturday. And if you look up Cheshire on their site, it said closed. Like, we canceled it. And we were like, what are you talking about? We called them up, and actually somebody coded it wrong, and it was supposed to be another school in Connecticut, and they accidentally coded Cheshire. We are holding the SATs on September 26th. And I know Dr. Gadd was sending something out about that. Again, our student achievement, K through, or 3 through 8, has been exceptional. Ranking, we've gone from 7th in the DERG in ELA to 1st, from 11th in the DERG in math to 4th over the last couple of years. Our overall state performance, we were about 40th 3 or 4 years ago. Now we're 5th in Connecticut. And you look at the other schools on that list, most of which are in Fairfield County, most of which are expending about $5,000 more per student than we are. I think we appreciate that we're a tremendous value, and the work that our students, staff, and community have done to put us in the top 5 in Connecticut is very impressive. And it's also a success for all learners. And if you look at the graph on the left, indicates the English language arts performance for students receiving special education services, where we were lagging behind the DERG, and now we're well outperforming the DERG. Our special ed performance is not just some of the best in DERG B, but best in Connecticut. So for both math and for ELA, we've soared. So we're really proud of that success. So where are we today? And I told you I'd mention Vuca a little bit later on. That stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That was initially identified by some Harvard researchers, but then really adopted by the U.S. War College at West Point, where they use that to describe planning for combat post-Cold War. And this has been really adopted in a lot of strategic planning in industry and private sector. But it really, I can't think of a better explanation for what we're dealing with right now, or a better label than Vuca. It is incredibly volatile. We change almost hourly in terms of responses and information. It is very uncertain. What you think is going to happen tomorrow may very nice. It's very close to the volatile, and what I think might happen 2 weeks from now is wildly uncertain and ambiguous. There are not a lot of right or wrong answers here as we go through this work. So it is like sailing the ship through a massive hurricane and being bounced all over the place. We're trying to keep all the folks on the boat, trying to keep the boat moving in the right direction. Not worried about what's necessarily served for lunch on the cruise. We just want to make sure we're continuing to get through this hurricane and reach calmer waters so that we can arrive at our destination, to continue the metaphor. But this is definitely a Vuca period that we're working through right now in education. So, Marlene, I asked her to talk a little bit about the next couple of items here as it relates to, our Vuca experience and what we're doing today. Like, every day this changes, and what are we doing to continue to keep the boat moving in the right direction? So, Marlene.
Thank you. It's hard to describe the things that we're doing that are new in the classroom, right? Because teachers are so good at having procedures and structures in place to manage the time to manage the students, to manage the physical space. And so they've had to revamp all of that because all of that is different. The students need to stay separated. The students need to wear masks and have breaks. When did we ever think that giving someone help by kneeling down next to them by their chair or whispering some words of encouragement next to them wouldn't be possible? And you'd have to work really hard mentally to think, how are you going to get that same message across without even having a facial expression to share with the child? So our teachers are really feeling this very, very personally, because all of the things that they've been taught are best practice and that they've worked on their craft for many years, they don't have those strategies anymore. So using Google Meet, we learned how to use Google Meet, but to do that simultaneously while attending to the students on a screen and also attending to the kids in the classroom is an incredible challenge. Navigating the audio and making sure that when you are saying something to a child that it's not overheard by the masses is something that weighs upon them as they're going through their day. Timing of their lessons so that they get back from the mask break and the hand washing break in time for the parent at home to make sure that their child is on that video call. They might be able to keep themselves on time, but they're now keeping the entire classroom on time to be back. I had a wonderful teacher yesterday tell me about how she uses exit tickets for math and how she's able to immediately gauge where the learners are. And she said she's trying to reinvent. Now I have the paper tickets in front of me for these students, but how do I get those the remote kids, how do I get their exit tickets so I could move along? So things that took 5 minutes before are not taking 5 minutes any longer. And teachers are frustrated, and I feel bad. They're frustrated with themselves because they're not able to move at the pace that they were. They're not able to teach in the way that they were. And so they're walking around feeling pretty defeated and exhausted at the end of each day because they don't feel that they're doing good enough. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about them doing something brand new in the classroom. It's like their first year of teaching all over again with the safety features, et cetera, and not having had the training to do it this way. So I tip my hat to them, and I am just impressed with what they are able to do. And I know that they will continue to make it better and do it better. But that's an idea of how things are going on that front. We are benefiting from the technology that we have. We are so grateful for the broadcast rooms because in those rooms, things are going pretty well. It's still all of those things I talked about, but the greater ease at which they are able to reach both in-person and remote students is at a higher level than, not higher level, but the facility of it is much better than having a Chromebook in front of you and trying to live stream to those classes. So we recognize the gift that those are and having those systems, and certainly more would be a significant upgrade to the level of service that we're able to provide. I did want to talk a little bit about attendance. I know. Oh, one more thing on sort of the learning and the in-person and remote. Tomorrow, we worked really, really hard, and the curriculum team, along with our tech integration specialists and our technology department, we are ready tomorrow to be able to send home nearly 2,000 devices to students in grades K through 6, along with power cords. So the notice went out today to our principals, and our media techs are readying those. There was a lot that needed to be done as far as waiting for those power cords to come in, making sure every device is scanned out to a student in the way a library book would be. So we're asking parents to make sure they hang on to those cords at home so that they can charge those devices, and the devices will go back and forth with the students. A little side note, the first grade Chromebook, it's called it's a Chrome Tab 10E, for any parents who might be watching and get these at home. It looks like it's fragile. They are actually ruggedized and they do not need a case. We have sort of, done some of our own demonstrations on them. So if they do come home and there's a concern about that, please know they are ruggedized. Certainly take care of them. But I did want to mention that tonight. So those will be going home tomorrow, along with some information for parents on how they can have that technology support for our Cheshire Public Schools issued devices. And we are also getting the message out to families that students should be using the Cheshire Public Schools device, because those are loaded with all of the tools that our students need. And if you do need tech support, we can support what we've provided, but it would be really difficult for us to support something that we don't know what's been loaded on it. So I wanted to make that note. The next item on the PowerPoint is regarding tracking attendance. And we absolutely want to encourage students to engage in learning in person and remote. And it's really important to all of us as a community, in order to continue to come to school every day for as long as possible. We want to encourage students to stay home if they are not feeling well. Above all is safety. And if they are feeling well enough to join a Google Meet that's been preset, then they are welcome to do so when that's available. For our in-person students who are in-person learners, that might not always be possible. We won't be able to get that message to the teacher to have them now invite that student to participate in a Google Meet. But for students who that is already available because of either their class or because that's something that is already being provided, they are welcome to join. If we're thinking about this from the frame of what's best for a student, and if the student wants to get that learning, even though they may be home with a headache or the sniffles or whatever it might be, and they're willing to do that, then we will provide that. We can provide that to them. It won't always be available, however. If you have an in-person teacher, or if the student is in a classroom that doesn't have that, it just might not be feasible for us to do that for a student who is taking a sick day, in other words. I want folks to remember that there's no award for perfect attendance this year. That has sort of gone by the wayside, and we need to report our attendance to the state, but obviously we are being much more flexible in how that attendance is taken, and there are not penalties for our kids who can't be there, right? And so if there's an in-person learner who decides that they know their teacher has a meet, and maybe they have a headache in the morning, so they can't go to first or second period, but by third and fourth period, they opt to join on, that's great. I don't want anyone to be alarmed if they are marked absent for that day. There's not a mechanism for our organization to track the first period, second period, et cetera, to determine what we call them at the end of the day. So if we're focused on the learning and the learner wants to be a part of that and it's available to them, they're welcome to join it. I don't think we can get caught up in if it's a present or absent day. That's secondary. And it really, in this year of COVID, does not carry the weight that it did in the past.
Yeah, perfect attendance this year is you stay home if you're sick. That's perfect. And we do want students, I was talking to the union vice president today about this, and she like flipped out. She was like, no, please, first of all, stay home. Second of all, tune in if you can, if it's available to you. Like Marlene said, not every single classroom has that. Part of that's tech related. Part of it is how the infrastructure was set up in the teacher with the Google Meet. But as much as you possibly can, we want you participating. You may be marked absent, but we don't care about that. You're not going to get an award if you, like Marlene said, if you're not marked absent at all. We have to do that to track with the state, but we want you to participate, and we're not going to have you sit, repeat a grade because of absences for that sort of thing. Please engage if you can. Finally, I want to talk really quickly about managing incidents. As I think many people are aware, last night we had an incident. And when I say incident, I mean something related to COVID. And we've had a variety of them from the outset, from our professional development days, where starting with an administrator who we thought could have had COVID. She is super high fever, feeling terrible, negative test, but we notified people, notified our staff. This was before students arrived. And we had a teacher who went for a quick test, was called and told it was negative, called back, told it was positive, had a more thorough test. I think it's PCR. I don't know. Had that test and had that all evaluated by the state. State said, no, you were never positive. You're negative. You're good. We've had some other incidents where people have been close contacts. So a close contact, I want to remind folks, is somebody who, if you have been within 6 feet of an individual for 15 consecutive minutes or more, and that person was positive, now you are considered a close contact. That person must self-quarantine. Now, other people that have been around that close contact are not required to self-quarantine, for medical reasons that are beyond my understanding. But I know that this is what the CDC says, Department of Public Health, Maura Esposito. Everybody has repeated this to me. Therefore, and they know more about this than I do. So we're trusting in that. And our rate of spread has been low. So I trust in that. So when we get an incident, there is an absolute ripple effect of things that occur. Last night, Vin texted me at 8 p.m. and said we were notified that an employee at Highland tested positive. So we have to immediately engage in our own contact tracing. We have to contact not DPH, but Chesprocott. We have to evaluate who was this individual in touch with. Now, granted, with a contractor who doesn't know the other people who work in the building, who did you come in contact with today? They could say, well, I don't know, this dude, he looks like really handsome. And people would say the superintendent. And they're like, I don't know. Like, how do you know?
Nice try.
How do you know? So, as we worked through that process last night, we couldn't be 100% certain. If, they said, no, I didn't come into contact with anybody, which is great. That's a great start. But we like to verify this with other people. At 2:00 in the afternoon, it's a little easier than it is at 9 p.m. So not being absolutely certain, we make the decision, better to be safe than to be sorry. She said, no, I wasn't in contact with anybody. And then I find out tomorrow when everybody's in school, oh yeah, I forgot I had lunch with those 5 people. Now we have a serious problem that could impact not only our availability to provide teachers and staff, but could make people sick in the worst case scenario. So we make the decision at that point, it's better to be safe, confirm with our staff that nobody has been in contact with this individual. And indeed, early this morning, we were able to do that. Maura was able to review the test results, able to confirm, these things. That's why we had to go to a 2-hour delay this morning so people could get devices so that we could get our feet underneath us today and have that remote. So our intention is not to close schools every time somebody tests positive. Our ultimate goal is that we don't have staff and students testing positive, which, that is another reminder to please wear your masks out in public. When our students, they're so religious during the day. From that time they go through the door to the time they leave it, they are so good about it. Then they leave, and I worry about it. you know, because I see kids in the community not wearing masks, not being socially distant, and you know, they're still playing on teams, they're still traveling, doing some of these things. It's important to wear that mask to protect yourself and your family and everybody else. And I did send that message in a video message to all of our 9 through 12 students last Friday, you know, thanking them for being so vigilant in the building. But let's not forget, we're not just exposed in the building. You know, you're exposed when you go anywhere. So that is an important reminder for folks. If somebody is positive, and we affirm that there's an individual that's positive, we will continue to work with Chestercott. We will identify for the 48 hours before that person was identified, or you know, from the time that they started to have symptoms, or if they were asymptomatic, tested positive, the 48 hours before, who was within 6 feet of that individual for 15 minutes or more. We need to know that now. And we would do that during the day. It's much easier, obviously, than at 9 at night to get responses from people. We would do that as expediently as possible, move as quickly as possible to quarantine those who have to be, and open the next day. That would be the plan. Again, like last night, it's not always that smooth. It was that smooth on Monday night when I was doing the same thing, but 3 hours earlier in the night, we were able to work through that process much easier. So, you know, when these things come up, we do that. Now, last night we emailed the Highland community. It impacted the Highland community. That's what we will continue to do. Email the building. Now, you know, in a nanosecond, it's available online. But as we're trying to prep this stuff, we're not trying to prep messaging and get into Power School at night, school messenger notices that go out to the entire district. That slows the process down, actually. It took us a long time, actually, to make the robocalls last night through Power School for just Highland. If I'm trying to do stuff like that district-wide for thousands of people, a building itself is over 1,000 people in most cases. So that's why we stick to the one building for expedience and efficiency. But let's face it, I mean, we did post to Facebook. We'll continue to do that. And that gets the information out pretty quickly too. I think it was like a 1/10 of a second between the time that we sent the email out.
Actually quicker.
And Tony was already getting calls from press. I got calls from press, you know, 9:48 at night, somebody calling my house, confirm stuff. I did take the call. You know, our last text was about 11 o'clock last night. So we work, it's a thorough process. And I just wanted to kind of explain what we go through as we manage an incident. Finally, I would just say, as I think Marlene said, our goal is to get every student back in school as much as we possibly can every day. And, you know, we will continue to evaluate with medical professionals what's appropriate. The biggest stumbling block we have at Cheshire High from getting people in every day, all day, are the mitigation strategies we're required to implement in order to provide a safe environment and then reduce the spread. I hate the hybrid, you know, my oldest is doing it in a high school. You know, actually my middle schooler is also doing it. Where we live, it's tough. You know, I'd really prefer kids to be there every day, all day. Our staff would prefer that, but we can't implement the appropriate mitigation strategies to ensure that we can continue that for an extended period. Because, you know, you saw the enrollment, 1,400 students alone, plus another couple hundred staff. And the building is not really large enough to accommodate, you know, you'd have lunches all day, every day, people spread everywhere. It would dramatically impact programming. You couldn't walk through hallways. They're just not wide enough to accommodate 1,600 people changing periods. So once we can get a clearance on those mitigation strategies, we will start to introduce more students into the building. because I know that that's what they want, their parents want, we want. In the meantime, like, our other schools, we are doing the very best we can under these Vuca conditions to provide the best educational experience we can. You also saw the data. Our kids are coming into this pretty well off. They are outperforming most everybody in Connecticut, at least by the measures that we have that can compare us to other people in Connecticut. So our students are not going to come through this process, absolutely backward. It's just not going to happen. I mean, everybody globally is dealing with the same problems. And our kids have learned a tremendous amount. It may not be the stuff we had in our curriculum, but they've learned a lot over the last 6 months related to technology and engagement and epidemiology and other things that they will carry with them the rest of their lives. It's, again, not what we planned in our curriculum, but our kids will be okay. And I want our teachers to hear that too, that as much as they are frustrated by not being able to provide the way they used to provide. I was talking to a teacher of 30 years. She's an amazing teacher earlier today. And just like, I have this whole bag of tricks. I can't use any of them anymore. Like everything I've accumulated over 30 years of knowledge in my profession is pretty much gone. And so I'm just relying on, I know kids, I know my content. Under these circumstances, I'm going to do the best that I can. But it feels like she said, if people were to watch me teach on video, I'd be humiliated because this isn't what I do. This is not at all the way I teach. This is what I'm trying to stumble through in this situation. So reminding our students and our parents and our staff that our kids will be okay. They'll still go on to be super successful and with these complex thinking skills, we'll be okay. But hang in there, and hopefully we're through the choppy water really soon. We all want that. So with that concludes my slides and presentation for tonight. I appreciate your attendance and watching on TV, I should say, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Just some comments. I have questions, but just remind everyone that we do have superintendent's report, and I understand we can go in more detail on some topics then if we like. I forgot to mention earlier in the beginning of the meeting that for those watching, if you have questions, concerns, comments, you can submit those to CPS COVID-19 at cheshire.k12.ct.us, which is our email I've just been using during the meetings. It's a couple of comments. First, I know I speak on behalf of the whole board. I'm sure the board will want to mention something too, but it has been a year like no other. It has been a summer like no other. And I know typically during these summer months, students, families, in particular teachers, employees get a chance to take a break from the schools. Even Jeff and Vince and Marlene tend to find a few days off in the summer and just unplug and spend time with the family. And that hasn't happened this year. I think all of our staff, everyone is working throughout the summer to get ready for reopening. And, parents were plugged into that. There were a number of meetings that the administration folks reached out to get input for reopening, a lot of legwork, a lot of creativity. I'm still pretty impressed the fact, Vincent and Jeff, that you're able to at least get classroom technology for 56 classrooms, because it's pretty much unattainable at this point out there. Even the power cords that Marlene mentioned, even my company, we're having a difficult time getting extra monitors and keyboards, even headsets for our employees. So, there's a lot of creativity. So I personally want to thank everyone in our school district for all the hard work to get to this point. I will tell you, it's been a lot of positive feedback I've been hearing. I think we have some parents where their kids are able to tune in remotely from home. Parent gets to see for a few seconds what the teacher is saying, and they're impressed. They're impressed with the enthusiasm from the teachers and support. So, there's issues here and there, but I've also seen our district respond pretty quickly to those too. And it is an evolving process. So I don't want to underestimate the impact that all employees are having. So thank you, everyone. I know it's first quarter of the game, right? We're well on their way, and we'll see how it goes. But don't know if any of the board members want to comment on the presentation. Yes, Tim.
Thank you, Tony.
Couple of, so, you know, our infection rates are still, they're at 1%, and that's great relative to other states. But we do pre-K at Darcy, right?
Yes.
And I think it was a day ago, we got a new mandate down to 3 has to wear masks. So that is the plan at
It
Darcy.
is.
Yeah, I understand it. It just seems like insanity to me to ask a 3-year-old to do that, but understood.
Vinny is well versed in the PPE domain and even ordered pediatric masks.
Okay.
So we're covered there.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a shift.
Yeah.
It was confusing because the Office of Early Childhood Education and Department of Ed had 2 different guidance for that age group. And so they've reconciled that and pushed the mask mandate down to 3 years old.
Yeah.
So it's different.
Yeah.
To see a 3-year-old in a mask.
Sports at Dodd, are they happening?
Not right now. We are exploring as of October 1st. I told people we would look at that at October 1st. But at this point, we don't plan on having sports. Certainly not interscholastic, and potentially not intramural, but we haven't made that decision fully yet.
Okay, yeah, no, I was talking to a friend from North Haven, and he said middle school has intramurals this year, and that's, or at least for the fall, that's what they're planning on.
Right. Yeah, we're exploring that option.
Okay.
If our numbers were to stay low and we remain in school, it may be a potential. But right now, I'm worried about tomorrow,
Yeah.
and then next week we'll start to think about that for October 1st. And there's nothing big happening tomorrow. It's just the point that we're trying to get through day by day.
Yeah, no, I got it. Okay, and you just said what you said at the meeting a week ago, which is there's no decisions on is it basically any sports having matches, games before October 1st?
Yes.
Okay, so even cross country or swim, which are listed as low risk.
Yeah, no, we're not doing anything.
So there's not
at
even
the middle school level before October 1st.
Oh, I'm talking about the high school level.
At the high school level, the CIAC did release a fall sports schedule today for safe sports, for low risk sports. And I have that here if you'll give me a minute to look that up.
We can
Yeah,
show this in
go
more
ahead.
detail during your superintendent updates as well.
Yeah.
Available.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to point out, I mean, my concern, just so people understand, is I want to keep the kids in the school as much as possible this year. And when it comes to social distancing, contact is just the opposite of it. And that's my concern.
They are looking at October 1st for a high school athletic start date for contests of the of pretty much everything except for football. Football has been canceled for the fall by DPH and CIAC, and CIAC is exploring the spring as an option for football.
Okay.
But other sports that the Department of Health has deemed low risk are able to start on October 1st.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Adam, you had a comment or question?
Firstly, thank you for the incredibly detailed presentation. I think it put many parents at ease, I think, and answered a lot of questions that have been floating out there the last, let's say, week or so. And I encourage any parent who's watching, if they have any further questions to, on the educational level, like we had stressed last time, begin with the teacher, work your way up the ladder to solve the problem that way first, to see if there's a resolution there.
Yeah, thanks for reiterating it. It's a great point.
Yeah, something I had forgotten
Yeah.
last time. So, and then for your actual enrollment figures, did that include the remote learners as well?
Yes, that's all students.
So that's like if there was a class of 20, not necessarily there's 20 in the classroom.
No.
It's just that's everyone.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Or the rule of thumb, and it's been amazingly consistent to me, across the district from the time we initially polled in July to now is 15% of students are at home and engaging in remote learning.
Thank you.
Seeing as no other comments, we move on to presentation. Item number 3, which is audience. Not sure, Jeff, there's any audience emails yet? Maybe
Yeah, there
perhaps a
are.
presentation,
Yep.
or if they're COVID related, we could address them during your report. It's up to you.
Yeah, we could just hit them really quick.
Please, yep.
Many of them have been addressed through the presentation. This was a question about having K2 learners just do remote learning. And Marlene, Vin, and I met with the teachers union leadership today, and we're exploring that. So right now, in many cases, we have some teachers that have remote learners and live learners at the K2 level. And, the concern is also when you have 15, 16, 17, 7-year-olds all remote, that isn't always easy either. So we're working with the teachers to try and figure out what's the best combination to try and tackle that. And it's one of those things that you can kind of hypothesize about, but when you live it, it could be different. So we are exploring what's the best option there. This was a question about districts going to full-time at the high school. There are multiple questions about that, and I think I addressed that. Question about Chromebook coming home. Marlene addressed that. SAT question, I also addressed that. Policy for students who are homesick, Marlene addressed that one. There was a question about any plans to address congregating of students that are neither distance nor masked the minute they are outside the doors of the schools but still on school grounds both before and after school. I guess we can have more people outside to police that, to encourage mask wearing. It is difficult when kids are out in the community, but this is specific to our school grounds. And I addressed the fact that why didn't we make all schools aware last night that there was an issue at Highland. I did address that part. There's a rather lengthy question about standard operating procedures manual. We do have something basically like this. This question asks for a lot of detail, which we have in different places. Sometimes not always consolidated into one document. At this point, we're just trying to make sure people are following the right directives. So I don't know if we'll be able to get to this at some point soon, but we are focused on standard operating procedure in different areas. The state has released information. I think they're up to how many addendums do we have now? 12 addendums. And so each one addresses something different. So it's very hard for us to put together a comprehensive, SOP manual when the information is so drips and drabs. So that really is our standard operating procedure, what the state has issued us. And that addresses all of the questions that we received.
I did that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Faye.
Can I just ask for clarification? You said that you're exploring K through 2 possibly going full remote?
No. I apologize. I'm glad you asked that. If anybody thought that, that's not what we were trying to do. We think for our youngest learners, being in person is really, for all of our kids, but particularly youngest learners, the preference is to be in school if they can, and if their families are comfortable with that. The question was, teachers we have students that are remote. The families elected to go remote, and juggling the remote students and the live students together. This person saying, have you thought about doing it like all the remotes to one teacher? And yes, absolutely, we have. We've just decided to go in a different direction to create connections, not knowing would we be remote 2 weeks in, full remote anyway, trying to make sure we have good connections with between students and teachers was number one. But we are exploring that, and is this working well for kids? Again, it's only day 4, I think, that we've been in school or something, all students. So, it's going to take some time to evaluate and adjust to. And I don't want to throw something out after a couple days only to realize, well, wait, that really was the better solution. So we're trying to work through it a little bit, assess the value, and then we'll amend it when needed.
Thank you.
Yep.
Must have been the best.
Thank you. We're moving on to reports of standing committees, starting with 4A curriculum. Report on a meeting held September 14th.
Okay, Curriculum Committee met this past Monday, September 14th. Tony Perugini and Harrigan Big-Am present were Martin Solano, Kevin Hanlon, Mary Gadd. Minutes were accepted. The primary, the bulk of the meeting was devoted to professional development and what took place over the summer in preparing faculty for teaching. And so Marlene Solano and Dr. Mary Gadd provided an overview of some of the district professional development during the August and September PD days prior to the start of school. Topics for professional development were linked to being able to proactively plan for in-person, on-campus, remote, option fully remote, and hybrid learning models that may be used during the year. Each class this year will be organized through a learning management system to help facilitate learning in each of the learning models. Google Classroom will continue to be used in grades 4 through 12, and Seesaw is being introduced in grades K through 3. Professional development was provided for additional technology tools to help increase interactive, collaborative, and remote capabilities. Part of the professional development was also focused on helping teachers to plan to onboard students to use and expectations, to the use and expectations of these tools. One other key aspect of professional development centered on using acceleration as a strategy for addressing the loss of learning time and focusing on the most important areas of learning this year. Professional development sessions at the high school also included collaboration time for teachers to adjust to teaching in an 80-minute block. An overview of the professional development offering around social emotional learning was also highlighted. Then we talked about the state assessment calendar, which the state has published its annual assessment calendar for the year, and it includes all of the traditional dates for SBAC, CTAA, NGSS, LAS, LINCS, EL, and SAT. So the whole gamut. At this time, state testing is proceeding as normal for the 2021 school year. And then we adjourned.
Thank you. Any questions on the curriculum committee report?
I have one on the standardized testing. So what are the expectations for this year? I sort of assume that perhaps it would be another year where we kind of wave things off since everything's not perhaps as robust as it could be. What's the sort of feeling there?
At this point in time, the state has published their calendar, so we'll proceed as we have. I expect that we'll probably see some changes to that. That's just a Marlene guess. But I think the plans that we put in place, the strategies for instruction and the way we've looked at our curriculum, that we would hope to have our students prepared for anything that came their way.
Well, that's good news then, I guess. Thank you.
Yes, Tim, please.
Thank you. A few minutes ago, you were talking about how it's difficult there is some difficulty for the teachers. They had a 6-hour day, and now, frankly, they have less time because they're after a mask break, get the kids who are on video to come back in. Just wondering if you are having, maybe not yet, but have an idea of what'll transpire over this year? Will you be, talking with other curriculum assistant superintendents, getting ideas? Where are your schools? Do you have the same problems? I'm guessing they do, but because I'm wondering if the whole state is, if we're doing great with scores and stuff right now, but it's all different this year. So just where do we compare to other schools? Not in a necessarily like an actual quantitatively measured way, but at least anecdotally in conversations with other school districts, if you'll have those conversations.
Been having those conversations since March.
Yep.
And our team has attended numerous workshops over the summer,
Okay.
done significant research on the topic of learning loss and how you plan for that, which is why we settled on the strategy of acceleration in order to make up for that loss. So we've also looked at our curriculum and identified the most important standards for any given grade level. So we've talked about what we're going to provide as exposure and what we're going to go deeper on so that students get the most meaty and most important topics in the grade level.
Yep.
So yes, and we're all talking about that.
Can you just define acceleration? Because
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
it could
yes,
throw
yes, yes.
people off.
Yeah, it's
Yes. So don't get me wrong, acceleration is not about going faster and going ahead of the grade level. That is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is continuing to, I describe it as keeping your foot on the gas pedal and not stopping to go back and reteach everything that you think they missed, but rather teaching what is important and germane in the grade level and providing those just-in-time supports for students that need them, and not teaching things just in case they need this and just in case they need that, but focusing on formative assessments to find out, what do students already know and are able to do, so that we're continuing to move forward and not, reteaching unless it's necessary and needed at that time.
Thank you. Thanks, Marlene.
Thank you. Seeing as there are no questions of curriculum, thank you, Faith, for the update. Finance Committee, we have financial report and medical benefits report.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Masiana again since he was the person who mainly put this together. I'll allow him to summarize and report on the details. But before he begins, I just want to say that I will schedule a meeting for the end of October. I think you had mentioned in another one of our meetings that you'll have a better financial picture more near the end of October, I believe.
Yep.
So that we can go over that before we head into the next budget season. So I will schedule something then so we can kind of review all of that.
He's already waiting. For
Hand
next-
over the floor to you, Mr. Masiano.
Adam's just anxious to get to the next budget process.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Grippo. Before I begin, since you mentioned budget season, I do want to let you know that budget season has started for us. We put together our timeline, and budget documents have been prepared this week. We'll be sending them out to the principals and the department managers next week. The budget process does begin relatively early. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with the goal that by roughly Thanksgiving, we would have the initial budget, prepared internally, and then the first presentation, of the superintendents to the board happens in early January. So we're already, it's hard to believe, but we're already working on next year's budget. With the finance report, the school district's budget at $74,593,926. That's the approved budget for this year. We're only in month 2. We haven't completed all the encumbrances for payroll and transportation. I can tell you, as I sit here, we're not concerned about any major variances other than those related to COVID, which is really what I want to talk about a little bit. And it's only day 4 of school. So even with that, it's really hard to understand what the run rate would be for expenditures related to COVID. As we reported in last month's report, and it is on the narrative, so I'm just going to refer to that quickly. We expect just to cover the cost of additional building cleaning, which we're doing throughout the day, the tent rentals, the storage of furniture and equipment that I talked about in the presentation earlier, purchase of PPE, and substitute coverage for when our teachers and other staff are on leave. We expect that estimate will be about $800,000. Okay, so that's kind of an early estimate of what we believe we will expend over the course of the year. As I explained last month, and if you look at page 2 of the finance report, I do have some details on what the state has approved in terms of funding to help offset some of the COVID-related costs. So the first piece is the CARES Act funding, also known as the Elementary and Secondary Emergency School Relief Fund. Our prorated portion of that from the state is $85,264. Cheshire was allocated a total of $99,144, but part of that goes to the non-public schools in town, Cheshire Academy and St. Bridget's. So when you subtract the $13,880 that went to them, $85,264 is what we have available under the ESSER funds. The second piece that's on the page, what I'm showing you is based on a survey that we filled out August 11th, we estimated that personnel costs could be as high as $640,000 and non-personnel costs would be $1,045,000. So we had submitted on the survey a total of $1,685,000. On the right side, what the state has approved is $706,075. Now, the survey that we filled out, we're not really sure what the purpose of the survey was, but as it turns out, the state was actually calculating some funding, which is the right side of the page. Some of the costs that we had, for example, on the personnel costs, we set $200,000 for bus monitors. I don't think that is, and that was assuming the daily cost if we would have 180 days of bus monitors. It doesn't appear we need that, and certainly, not on every bus run, even if we continue it. And so you could see in that section, the state has approved $11,012 under personnel for cleaning, PPE, health, safety, and $75,000 for personnel transportation. So the way the survey was written, that's not the way the state approved the funding. So we're waiting for the state to give us details on exactly how that was calculated and how we can apply for reimbursement. So I'm sharing with you the information I have with the caveat that we're still waiting for the information from the state on exactly what will be funded within these categories. On the lowest section, the three towards the bottom, if you look at technology device purchases, we indicated $125,000, $9,000 for Wi-Fi hotspots, and $200,000 for the broadcast classrooms. The state has not approved any funding for any technology. I heard, through the school business officials organization that the state is still looking at that. So there may be funding coming for that. But as of this point, what's approved is for non-personnel under cleaning, PPE, health and safety, $600,000 for Cheshire, and $20,000 for non-personnel transportation. That $20,000 is basically for bus cleaning supplies. So a few minutes ago, I mentioned we are estimating costs of about $800,000 for certain categories. Right now, the state is saying we'll get $706,000, but it doesn't align necessarily to all the categories that we would need funding for to offset our costs. So there's a little bit of wait and see here. It's also my understanding that, that $706,000 will be in the form of a reimbursement. So the district would have to supply evidence, receipts, or invoices showing those expenditures, and then we would be reimbursed. And I don't have any information to indicate that if we underspend in one category, you can, spend the excess funds in another category. I'm hoping that's the case, but I don't know if that'll be the case. So, that's really the update that I wanted to give on finance. And it seems like we have some questions around that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I keep thinking I'm mask on down, ready to ask a question, but I don't want to interrupt you, so it's down now. So our budget is $74,593,000. When, you gotta love this state and their survey, that's not explained, but in the state survey, and what the folks watching don't see is we have a detailed document that lists all the individual line items that Vincent identified in the surveys as costs that we might incur related to COVID. So the bottom line is $1.7 million in potential costs. I understand that might change. And between the $86,000 received and the $700,000, we're about $706,000 potential reimbursement to those costs. And we'll have to see as the months go if that gap widens in our budget. So the question I have is reimbursement. I know it's a little premature. We also legally can't spend more than what we have in our budget.
Correct.
And for new board members, you are personally liable for that, by the way. Second, by law. And second, just heads up. No, I'm serious. But that should not happen. We can't, if we spend over our budget, we're responsible. There's some stuff around that. Hopefully that doesn't happen. So I'm curious how we're going to pay for things, potentially go over budget. And by the time the reimbursement comes back, what role the town would have to play in that? Because if we don't have the money to spend, my guess is, again, this is a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
We have to ask for more money to pay for expenses, hope that the state reimburses us, town gets a check back. I know it's too early to think about that stuff, but we'll keep a close eye on this.
Oh, I think about that every day.
That's why you can't pay the big bucks, Vincent.
The simple answer is that we're going to manage our budget the way we always do. And in this case, I agree with you, Mr. Perugini, that we know we're going to have expenditures, and I'm not sure when that reimbursement will come and exactly what form it will come. So we're managing our budget. We have a 40% expenditure cap on all our non-payroll line items. So we're not approving anything more than we need to approve at this time in the areas that we typically would hold back on. So it's everything from instructional supplies and other technology expenditures, building maintenance and repairs. We're just doing the things we have to do, but up to that 40% cap. And we'll keep that cap on until we have some confidence in our run rate on, things like PPE. We're estimating $15,000 a month. It's an estimate. As we get through this first month of school, I'll know, exactly what the run rate is.
Sure.
And again, assuming we stay in school, which I'm hoping we do, that's what the anticipated expenditures will be. If we go remote, then that expenditure profile is going to change. So there's a lot of variables and unknowns that we don't know, but every year, and Ms. Perugini's not kidding, that the law says that the board members are, responsible for any budget overages, but I'll make sure that no board member has to write a check because I value my job. I respect all of you, but I value my job too. So,
No, I'm painting a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I know it's a little early, but it's a very different experience for us, even veteran board members. So thank you for this, Vincent. You're welcome.
Mr. Massiano, before you move on, just in regards to the reimbursement process, does your office work with someone directly from OPM, or is it through the State Board of Education, or whatever they call themselves?
I didn't hear what you said. Do we work directly with who?
Do you work directly with OPM, like someone from OPM, or do you work with someone from the State Department of Education for the reimbursement?
No, the employees that we deal with at the state level are from various departments, not only the Department of Education. So some of the staff sometimes is from OPM.
So I was just going to say, it's a little disingenuous of them to just sort of give you a questionnaire instead of a formal application, if they're going to hold you to line items like that. I mean, if you were to fill out an application, that's one thing. But if you're just doing something that you're not quite sure what it was for, except for guidance to give them like what they could give you, not that we don't mind that they're at least
Yeah.
saying that they're going to give us money, but to have them hold you to line items in an application, I think is a little ridiculous. So I hope they're flexible on, how they allow for us to apply for reimbursement. So-
I mean, I think, and Kathy Dempsey, works for the State Department of Ed, and she's the chief financial officer. I'm not sure that is her exact title, but, I think like everything else during this pandemic, they're trying to help. And so they get information out, we
Right.
respond, and then, they turn that into, the beginnings of a reimbursement grant is really what it is. So you're right. It wasn't an application for a reimbursement grant. It was, tell us what you think the estimated cost will be as we go through the school year under this pandemic. So, yeah, there's work that needs to be done by the state to get us the information. And so there's been communication, but we're waiting for the written documentation as it relates, to this. And yeah, there are some things that were a little bit that affected different school districts differently. So, with our cleaning service, we do it on a contracted basis. So it's not a personnel cost. The state, so far on the approval, has been very, very light on approving personnel costs and a lot stronger on approving contracted services and PPE. So, for us, where we're able to hire that intraday cleaning staff through a contractor, right now, it looks like we would get reimbursed, but a community that has hired staff to do that additional cleaning wouldn't be. So I think the state is hearing all that, and we'll have to figure out a solution that works for everybody.
Faith, go ahead.
I just, more an observation, the 40% expenditure cap.
Mhm.
I guess I just get a little worried at what point we begin to cannibalize ourselves. And, it's typically 60%.
Usually at this time of the year, we're at 60, so.
Yeah, especially with capital projects and maintenance, if we're, I don't know, just a statement of concern. And I don't know what you can do about it, because I don't want to write. I want to express my.
Again, it's month 2 and day 4 of school. We've not deprived anybody of things that they're the essentials. But as the year progresses, if we can't raise that 40% cap, it'll have more impact, and we'll need to talk about that and just prioritize what's more important than what. It's not new. It's just more severe because of the pandemic right now.
Thank you.
Tim, go ahead.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, Vin, are you having, you may do it in years past, but are you having an ongoing dialogue with town hall? Because that's, rather than my pocket, there is a rainy day fund here. So just figured I would ask if you do have those conversations, not every day, but monthly or something, keeping them in the loop.
Yeah, I mean, we talked to Jim Jascott, the finance director, and Sean Kimball, regularly. We
Yeah.
have strong communication. But I think, the point that Adam's making to hold a finance committee, ultimately, the town council is the fiscal authority. So there would
Yeah.
have to be, formal notification or a request. And I think the council, is already aware through multiple communications that we've got some pressing issues related to COVID that we may have to, come and request additional funding.
Yeah, for what it's worth, it's been probably 4 weeks ago, maybe. I was talking to Chairman Orris on town council. He checks in from time to time, see how we're doing, and if we need any help. And I do thank town council for reaching out from time to time. I know you're in talks, but I did iterate what you said is, as we get closer to the opening of school, this is the time, and get to that first month or two, we'll have a really good idea of where we'll be. So it's not that we have nothing to share with them as well as scare them at this point either. But so that's the point of finance committee meeting. So we are. And I think it's just to be good to walk them through some of the things we saw tonight, how we got to where we are and how we see things going, just so that, whether we go to them or not, we don't know yet. At least there's an idea, but I'm pretty sure to have communication with Sean and Jim. So
1.2 million. And we do have that $200,000 that was rolled over. So, I didn't include that here, but, that still is an available area that we can expend against. So I don't think anybody needs to worry yet. We're just going to track it and manage through it.
I'm not worried.
Okay, good.
Do you want to go through medical benefits?
Yes. So medical benefits, the board members do have the medical benefits report. Again, it's only the first month. It was a very high claim month of 1,207,789. We began the we began the new year for medical benefits with a balance in the trust fund of 2,969,842. The $1.2 million does have some large claims still hurting us, but none of those claims are significant COVID claims, because I know that's been a question. So for the month, the trust fund balance decreased by 477,000. That puts us at 2,492,186. That gives us about 3 months of claims, and I'm using this year $800,000 as the monthly estimate. So that's how you get 3.12 months. Obviously, this month's claims exceeded that by a wide margin, but as we go through the rest of the year, hopefully the claims, do settle into a lower pattern, and then the new HSA plan year begins in January. So, we would expect the claims to go down at that point in time.
Then just one question, I always have a fun question for medical benefits. So you changed the calculation, it looks like, to 800,000 a month. Weren't we at like 740 before that? Something like that, or was it, am I incorrect?
Last year?
Yeah,
Yeah, the 800,000 is based on what the expected claims are from our insurance broker, USI.
okay, so that was just a revision at a particular date, it changed? Like
When-
July 1 or something? or-
Yes, when the renewal is done for July 1, they look at the claims for the prior, 12 months running. And so that was the estimate that they gave us. So that's why we'll use that as we go through the course of this year.
Okay, thank you.
And I will point out along those lines, if you look up at the top, the budget that we have is $724,100 per month. So those are the two benchmarks we'll be using. The $724,100, that's based on what we have approved. So that's what we'll be contributing every month. So the difference between actual claims and the 724 will, affect the trust fund balance up or down, except for any stop loss reimbursements that we get. Okay?
Hey, Ben?
Yes.
This is a stupid question, but if the contribution is 724, 100 per month, how come the contributions for August or July, whatever, the 729,500?
Yeah, there was just
Is that just some, like,
the
weird
components of that 724,100 include payments that we receive from retirees. So we didn't calculate it exactly correctly, because I asked the same question. I was like, well, how's it 729? So it's in our favor by
just is- it is
$4,000.
what it is.
So
Okay,
Take it.
I'll just leave it. Yeah,
fine.
it's a good question though.
Well, I'm paying attention anyway.
So if the 800,000, your calculation for, is that based on our claims experience, or is that just medical inflation?
No, that's based on the 12 months running claims. And they project out, they have an actuary that does that. And last year was unusual for us in that the high-cost claims, we were over $1.5 million. I mean, we wound up getting $1.5 million or so in stop-loss reimbursement. So, that's built into that 800,000. So hopefully those high-cost claims don't continue. I know that, in one case, the individual employee who had those high-cost claims has left the district. So that will drop off as we go through this fiscal year. So, we plan and then we cross our fingers when it relates to medical claims. But, we do have over 3 months of claims reserve. So, that's healthy. It was healthier. I mean, we were almost at 5 months at one point, but we'll keep our eye on it and manage accordingly.
I just have one more question. I don't think you were going to go through the budget detail at all, but just in general, and I know it's what are we, day 4, 5, for outplacement in special education. Are we sort of on target as far as enrollment in that area, or is it too soon to say?
Well, the number of outplaced students, I don't have the count. I think it's a little better than we anticipated, but if you look at that line, Adam, you could see that we've only encumbered 20.7%. So that's not because we're that much under the expectation. It's that we don't have all the dollars encumbered on expected outplaced tuition. And it usually takes the first 3 months, for us to analyze and project not only for outplaced tuition, but transportation and our payroll encumbrances too. So little early to say.
Okay, thank you.
The one thing I would add, though, is that there was a lawsuit extending transition services to age 22. It had been previously to 21. And so that's an unexpected impact on our budget in providing those services for an additional year. And it's sizable. And we'll provide more information as that becomes it's a relatively recent impact, unfortunately.
Are there any other questions? Turn it back to you.
Thank you, Adam. Up next is our policy committee report.
Oh.
Right back to you.
Back to me again. Thank you. For policy, this was our first in-person meeting. So I guess I'll use the summary that's in the minutes here for the report. I think our conversation was a little more in depth, but I think this paragraph sort of sums it up pretty well. And basically, the meeting opened, what was the day, on September 1st, where I asked the superintendent if there was further conversation or action that was needed by the policy committee regarding the incident that occurred last year with the lapsed coaching certification. Dr. Solon responded no. New procedure that responded no comma, but not that there was no new, there is a new procedure that has been put into place to track the certifications. And the superintendent stated that he will supply the board with a list of coaching certifications prior to the start of each sports season. At that time, the policy committee agreed that that was adequate for the resolution at this time. And then we had a little bit of discussion back and forth, a couple extra questions. And then we moved on to discuss about setting our agenda, our policy agenda for the rest of the year. Mainly whether or not we have to change any policies regarding electronic meetings and communications. And if any other policies come up during the year, we can add them as needed if something needs to be adjusted during this COVID situation. And that's essentially my report for policy. going forward, we're going to go back to online stream because we felt that having our conversations was actually ended up being more transparent if we were online where people could tune in via YouTube because normally no one attends a policy meeting, but sometimes conversations occur during policy that could be of interest, and it's easier for citizens to observe our conversation on YouTube.
I
So
agree. Thank you, Adam.
we're going to do that.
Thank you, Adam. I had a quick question, especially for Catherine and Ann and I. It seems like it's been several years that we've been continuously revising policies. And it's a good thing. We feel a little light this year. Are we pretty much, Jeff, caught up? I know the student activities policy we're probably going to look at is a little bit dated, but I think, are we pretty much caught up with our policies and bylaws refreshing? It's been going on for
Yes.
about 4 or 5 years now, at
Really, the
least.
last year and change was an absolute marathon
Mhm.
because there were many years where we adhered to law but never really updated policy. In the last few years, we had an audit done a couple of years ago.
Yep.
We initiated that and then updated a boatload of policies over the last couple of years. So yeah, we're caught up on that process, and now it's just
That's great.
more of a maintenance period now, thankfully.
Yeah, I just want to commend the policy committees, present and past in particular, for all the help to get us here. So that's good news. I just want to point that out. It's a
Though
good
we
thing.
are still going to check in with Cave just to make sure.
As we
didn't
always
miss
do.
anything.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. Any other questions from the board? Tim?
I just want to comment on the having the continuing virtual meetings. It was actually a little difficult for me. I strongly believe in having meetings in person and allowing people to come to the meetings. But like Adam said, I mean, I've been to hundreds of, well, he didn't say this, but I've been to hundreds of committee meetings, and most of them, there's almost no attendance ever from the public. Some of them definitely get it. And in the times when I would expect to have public want to attend a committee meeting, I absolutely would want to have it in person. But on the offset, if I expect nobody to come to a meeting, but we could actually have, 30, 40, 50 people watch it online, maybe even send in some emails and get a little bit more interaction, I think that'd be a good thing. So I'm comfortable going with the virtual meetings when I expect low attendance. But the other thing I just want to point out that I think is to parents with young kids in town. So last year I ran for the Board of Ed, and one of the things that went through my mind was, do I want to take all these nights away from my kids? And I didn't really want to, but I felt strongly about running for the board last year, and so I did. But at the same time, I think this provides an opportunity potentially, if we could do if the remote meetings work, the virtual meetings work, I think it could provide an opportunity for some parents who might be interested in running for office, but didn't want to take away so many nights from their kids. And so that is a reason why I really do like the idea of it. Thanks.
And just an additional point, thanks for bringing it up, is that we are going to be virtual unless we sort of get a feeling from the community that there needs to be an in-person meeting where there's going to be significant community interaction. And usually we usually get a feeling of it through Facebook, where people start emailing us about a certain subject that people want to speak about. And so we'll try and work that out, because we are still under the restrictions of 25 people, I think, during a meeting or
Indoors.
in the building, or I forget exactly what the
Yeah, indoor meetings.
restriction. Yeah. So as of right now, unless there is a feeling of really a lot of community involvement where they want to speak in person, that right now we feel that this is the best way to have the community know what's going on.
Yeah, and I know it's been a challenging year. When we started the school year last year, we were working with the town to have I think room 209 or 210 is set up so that at least the town council committees can be there and broadcast. So if folks can't be there, this is pre-COVID, by the way. So the idea was broadcast the meetings if you couldn't attend in person. I think while we're in this COVID mode, which will probably be the rest of the year, at least, and next year, If we can do them virtual, great. And maybe when things kind of go back to normal where that is, maybe we could possibly do some combination of having, board members here and remote via Zoom at a meeting. And if that's something we could talk about, we could always amend our policies. We're not there yet, but so I think there's a lot of flexibility. I think we've learned some positives of COVID to accommodate that work-life balance. So thanks for that, bringing that up, Tim. All righty, we're going to move on to school modernization committee update. I don't know if Ann or Andrew want to. We did meet last night. Yeah, yes, Andrew. Sure.
Why don't you start?
I'll start. You can fill in anything to leave out. So by action of the town council, last evening, Jim Jinks joined the school modernization. So we have our full complement of 12 individuals. There was an election that was held to elect both the chair and vice chair. The chair of school modernization, it was elected Jennifer Bates, who's a community member, PTA, PTO president. She's been on school modernization since its inception, member of the community. And then Chuck Neth. I worked with Chuck. We developed the RFP, which actually resulted in the hiring of Colliers, who is the consultant that we're working with, helping to guide the plan for the modernization of the schools. He's a PE, so I believe it's valuable to help guide the process and manage the consultant. So Colliers gave a presentation, Charles Warrington, he gave an update where they are. They're still continuing to review the data, touring the schools, talking to the administration to come up with the best plan to move forward. We don't have a copy of that plan. There's no draft of it yet to share. They hired Mylona McBroom, or we hired Mylona McBroom, and they're managing Mylona to do the enrollment and demographic study with the different projections. We received a 37-page draft of that, which hasn't been shared yet. They've done a good job looking at the different population trends in the community. There's not a lot of surprises in there. There's definitely a shift. The community is getting older. The average age is 48, which I thought was interesting. Birth rate from 1990s, there was over 300 births per year. We're down to 230 births as of 2018. And another interesting fact that I just jotted down last night is that between 2010 and 2018, there's been 1,376 new housing units built in town, but the population has not increased in the school age. So there's a lot of things that we're looking at there, and that's going to all get rolled in and then presented to the committee.
I would add one thing, very thorough report. I found it interesting that the enrollment study also reported that people don't move to certain elementary districts within Cheshire because they're, unlike many other communities, our district is considered a solid school district as a whole, and the elementary schools are not there's not a variance, a perception of variance of quality among the 4 elementary schools. And I think that just speaks volumes towards what we're doing, that we have this very cohesive school district as a whole. So kudos for that, because perception is reality in many cases, and certainly in this case.
Yeah, they showed a nice heat map of Cheshire where the districts are in relation to the home sales, and it's pretty much, it's not like Ann said, everyone's moving to the Highland district because it's the best school. It's consistent, which is great. The other thing I thought was very interesting too is what was the decline in housing starts. They pointed out that a lot of home sales this year are still waiting for the final numbers, but they're saying that there's a turnover of existing homes that's driving people to come in. And I think they correlated, if Andrew Ann remember, approximately 122 students on, I think, average came in to the district through those sales. So the point was it was a pretty thorough report. I feel sorry for Vincent and Jeff. They had to drop out because that's when he got the call for the case. So I thought it was very thorough, great meeting, a lot of detail. There were there was one thing I know that Colliers is looking for, which is the October 1st enrollment numbers. I told him after tonight we can send them this presentation, open schools, because there's good information in there. So if you guys don't mind giving that to
Oh, yeah, I'll take care of that.
and the other thing that came up as part of the enrollment was a lot of focus on enrollment, general student population. And what dawned to me was whether or not I'm sorry, I got to put this down for a second, whether or not our special needs student population was never be spelled out or identified in that enrollment. I don't know how they could. Should we give them some enrollment numbers around that population from us over the years? As I think I could be off on this, but I think my opinion is it may be a small population out of 4,000 students, but some of those students require more space in the schools, special services, more IAs. I talked about that. So Charles thought that might be a good idea just to have there a little bit of, so I'm not giving you guys more work to do, just heads up.
Demographics easy.
So, yeah. So I think we're meeting again in mid-October, early October,
5th?
October 5th. Yeah, the first Monday of the month, correct? Great, thank you. Any questions on Modernization Committee? Yeah, Faith.
Did they not also talk about how they saw something going on 5 years, that like an incoming kindergarten class that's they're starting to see an increase? You always said something.
Yeah, there was a increase, yeah.
We're gonna start to see a pretty significant increase, with the kindergartners in like 3 to 4 years, is that it?
Yeah, I think over the next 4 to 5 years, there was an increase at kindergarten and lower grade levels. Middle school level, I think it projected to be the same, but there was going to be a drop at the high school level for a few years. Not a significant one, but something noticeable. And then it kind of picks back up again.
But
Oh.
the suggestion is that we are going to start to see, as we're planning, that kind of,
Yes.
we're moving through the snake kind of thing. It's gonna get.
Yeah, they use 3 data sources for the enrollment trends. I think it was high, medium, low, but they strong not that there was much difference, but they recommended the group use a high projection because, especially in the later years, you want to have that space to accommodate growth. I'm going to try. I'll ask the committee if at least get the draft out to the board. I know it's not for the public yet, but it was presented last night, so I don't think it'll be a big deal. I'll try to share that with the group so you can see those charts better.
Yeah, I would add, Faith, that it's really consistent with what we were seeing from enrollment studies a few years ago when we did it before. There always was this projection of enrollments going up.
And are we seeing that in actual? We should be seeing that now, what you saw 4 years ago, and
Soon. I think we're still leveling.
Yeah. I
We're in
mean,
a downtrend still, a little bit. I mean, not again.
It's been steady.
It's like it's just below the level, right?
10 years, it's been level growth.
And what was ironic was the enrollment number today we saw was just around 4,011. And that was their low number, I think. Well, that's what kind of, so I'm glad I reminded that. So that 4,011 enrollment number did not include homeschool. So we'd be 440, but it's right there. I think, Andrew, if you have it up.
Well, they're saying that the high level, the high projected model assumption shows that over the plan for 4,660 students over the next 5 years.
But before then, there was going to be a little bit of a dip with enrollment.
Right.
What year was that going to happen? The low point?
It's not in the meeting minutes.
That's okay.
Years not here.
We'll get the pack out to the board somehow.
You say there'll be an overall 12% growth by 2030.
Guys, make a
Yes,
comment,
please.
or an observation. As I was watching the meeting last night, I think my takeaway of that presentation was that it really feels like we have about 5 years to get our act together, because it once 5 years is up, it really seems like things are going to start taking off again. And so it really seems like we need to be in place and ready to go within the next 5 years with whatever the plan is going to be, as things start moving again for the first, up through what was like 20 years or something like that. So that was my interpretation. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, mine too. My initial reaction
Yeah.
was, had we been able to do what we needed to do 3 years ago, we'd be on that track. But nonetheless, you're right. Yeah, it's,
Right.
I mean, our schools had high enrollment, as is, but the needs have changed. So I'm with you. And I'm sorry, running one more thing. So part of the discussion last night too was there was a summary shown of potential options. I guess as the committee's been talking all these months, someone say, hey, I should start at high school. Hey, I start at the middle school. No, so they just laid all this stuff out. And I think it was Chuck that asked me, I forget who it was, asked me what the board wants them to focus on, where to start. And my answer was, talking about this, we can't tell them that really. We're looking for a plan. We're looking for options, whatever they are. Once the data has been finished, enrollment studies, housing trends, the school feedback, Colliers is going to compile all that. And based on that, let's see what the committee comes up with. I mean, I told them I don't think we're in a position to say, hey, start at the high school or middle school. We kind of had the last plan, but all options are open. Tell us what you guys see, and we'll work with you to figure out the best option. So if I was mistaken with that, please tell me.
No, I mean, I was a little bit thrown off when he started into that discussion with, we have no deliverables yet from Colliers or from Elementary for him to look at in order to help guide that decision. So when he started asking if it was going to be the high school or the middle school or the elementary schools, I was a little bit, without any tangible evidence or just look at enrollment or what the school conditions are, or projections, I wasn't sure what he wanted from us. So
I think we're all excited in that committee to
Yeah.
do something. It's so I saw that. I don't think so. But again, this is why we have Colliers and helping. They're going to help guide that decision too. So I think we're getting there. I think next couple of months, while the data points finalize, we'll see what options play out. Yeah, Tim.
So aside from COVID in the last 6 months, I'm kind of skeptical about growth in the next 5 years, student population. What were the 2 or 3 bullet points? Did they give 2 or 3 bullet points to say why?
Well,
they had
But I mean the main drivers of it. Did they give?
For-
a lot about the housing.
Yeah, I mean, there's 100 and let's see.
Real estate's picking up.
Yeah, there's about 140 some odd approved new housing units, either approved or under construction currently in town.
Okay.
So it was based on that, and then looking at just the overall developable land in town.
Yep.
And then they talked with a lot of real estate agents over the summer about existing home sales, and there's a lot of out-of-state folks who have been moving
Yep.
into town.
COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
COVID related, they were talking about people, because of all the remote work that's being done now, that people will be moving.
Yeah.
It's predicted that people might be moving out of the cities and into the suburbs, and Cheshire is considered.
No, and that I find that
place
totally that
with
makes
good
sense to me.
schools where people would move to.
Yeah, no, that makes
Yeah.
sense to me.
but it wasn't. The projection wasn't driven by new housing development. It was dependent on existing housing stock turning over, which is sold. The real estate market's pretty hot, probably will be for a while, when the mortgage
Yeah.
rates are low. The other thing they also pointed out was, as far as affordable housing, they had the number in there too. I think there was, with the new development that's been approved, it's over 140 units, but they projected potentially maybe 50 or less students would probably enroll in the schools as a result of that.
Okay.
Potentially, don't really know. But that could be absorbed with our declining right now. So it seemed to be that because education is doing very well in Cheshire, and that's driving people to come here, and as long as there's housing stock to turn people over to come in, that's what's probably the main drivers. And
Yep.
also we have a nice community and so forth. So
what is the Vine Road, the one up near Vine Road, the new apartments, that's 100 units? You said over 100 units?
yeah, it's like 140,
114.
114, yeah.
So
There's
that
a couple
added
smaller
to
ones, too.
single family, it's 184 new housing units planned in town.
Okay.
Today.
That'd be built probably in the next 2 years is the basic idea. Okay.
I thought it was very positive,
All right. Thank you.
but we'll see if that projection, hopefully that lands, that forecast.
No, there's a basis for it. It makes sense to me now. I just think like the last 10 or 15 years, I don't think there's been a lot of growth.
No,
So why in the next 5 years? And that's it. So that makes sense. Thank
but
you.
even that growth is really small compared to what happened since the mid-90s. It's still,
Oh, yeah.
but something. Good questions. I'm sorry to belabor this one. I know we got a chance to talk about it too much. We actually get to do something. So number 5, we have approval of minutes in our packets. we have the meeting minutes from the meetings held on August 20th and September 9th. I don't have any changes to the minutes that I saw. I don't know if any board members have any alterations or edits to be made.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I'd
Anna.
like to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
Move that the Board of Education approve the minutes from meetings held on August 20th, 2020 and September 9th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Faith seconds. And the motion is move that the Board of Education approve the minutes from meetings held on August 20th, 2020 and September 9th, 2020. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you, team. Correspondence.
The only other, well, we don't have any. I don't want to jump. I'm getting ahead of myself.
I do not have any correspondence sent to the board that was requested
Yeah.
and read, and for record,
Nice.
do have COVID emails. Oh, I'm sorry,
You're not the secretary anymore.
Madam Secretary, do we have any correspondence?
I have no correspondence to report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Catherine. I didn't mean to overlook you. I just trying to beat 10 o'clock. Sorry.
Yes.
That's a joke. Thank you, Catherine. So number 7 is superintendent reports. This,
Yeah,
we
I
have some
think-
co-related
yeah.
emails that came in.
We did receive an additional email
Good.
asking about more information on special education that we send some out, and we will send something from the special education office update on that.
I think Marlene, thank you so much for earlier in the meeting talking about the absence policy. We've gotten a few emails, again, nothing critical, just that I think a couple parents are caught off, that if the child had a fever and want to stay home, but they're in that situation where there is no remote classroom way to plug in to take an absence. I think the only, the issue there is, I'm sure it'll be a relief to parents to know that the absences are not going to be held against them, which is great. And we reflects on that this year. I think it's just they might be feeling like they're missing out on the opportunity to do remote learning, if they had a way to do it. And my only ask is if I know it's not easy, I know it's especially for the grade levels that don't have this set up where when someone's home to do the same thing they do in class, but remotely, I know it's not always possible. If we can find a way to try to make something happen, I just got to imagine as the flu season starts, we might get folks that will be home, at least want a packet to work with if they could. I don't know, I'm just putting it out there. But I think we could put that, and I know we've talked about it so many times, but if there's a way to put that policy, the summary that Marlene did out on the COVID website,
Yeah, we'll definitely.
that might
do
cut
that.
down email traffic.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that.
Awesome. But thank you. That's the only question I had related to the COVID update. Any other questions related to COVID, Superintendent? I know you have one, Tim. I know you were waiting. Your mask is coming off.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering. So as I said before, I really am just concerned about, the infection rates going up above 1%, keeping the kids in the schools. So before sports start, are we going to be having another meeting and hearing from Chespercott, DPH, somebody about this? And I want to be direct about it. I looked at the Reopen Connecticut, and tell me if you're on board with basically what I'm saying. I looked at the Reopen Connecticut list. It's not just, I don't want to say sports. I want to say extracurriculars. Yearbook. Is that happening? Is it happening remotely? Is it happening in person? I just want to get a better idea about this with the goal of keeping the schools open. And when I looked at specifically one thing, which was sports, there's the Reopen Connecticut guidelines, and it has high, medium, and low risk. And it had, football as a high risk, and soccer. So I'm talking fall season. Soccer as a medium risk. And I don't quite understand what the difference is just watching a sport. And so I tried to look for details of the criteria used in setting these risk levels, and I couldn't find anything. And the people who were running the Reopen Connecticut, they didn't appear to be involved in sports per se. There were public health people, and there were a variety of people in education. But I just want to know, it doesn't really make sense to me. And I want to be careful about this. So I'd like to hear more from people before we go engaging in contact, basically, which band is band happening right now? Just to be clear on that, you have a large music program. What's happening? What's not?
Yeah, the national organization that oversees band performance has canceled the season. The projection of aerosols is significantly greater through instruments that would typically be played in a marching band show. So even with mitigating strategies, they decided that would not be appropriate. And I don't know if they are seeking to move that to the spring or not, but the band program was canceled. I don't feel like I have the expertise to make decisions about medical impact. Is the Department of Public Health has, I think, spent in some cases perhaps too much time going through this stuff along with CIAC, ultimately deciding that there are sports that are safe to play. We've had not only a number of kids, like, you think about just our high school sports or our interscholastic sports, but a boatload of kids in our community. I happen to coach a bunch of them on a hockey team that are participating in athletics all the time now. They've been doing so safely for an extended period through the spring. Now, I can't say that, or through the fall, excuse me, and late summer. I can't say the same for football. There aren't youth leagues really engaging in football. Most of the shoreline conference teams that our younger kids play in have canceled football for the fall, following really that DPH guidance. But other sports have been playing all along and been managing to do so pretty successfully. So, if the Department of Public Health is saying it's safe, I know that many of our students have been engaged in it. I also recognize that emotional well-being, as you've said too, that we recognize that component to being involved in athletics, the arts. We want to try and continue to provide these opportunities if medical professionals can tell us we're doing so safely. I think for most of our athletics, that's the case. I think we still need to be cautious. They still need to be very closely monitored. And I would like to try and do more of that along the lines of non-athletic contests too. Right now, it's all remote. All of our clubs are remote until at least October 1st. That was part of our summer plan. We're adhering to that plan. I pray that October 1st comes and we have to make a decision about clubs in person because we're still in person. Things are still going well. But that's kind of where I fall on the whole thing.
I guess the thing that goes through my mind is, I know sports have been ongoing throughout the summer, but I just wonder, and again, I'm not a public health person or a
Sure.
doctor, but I hear about the asymptomatic.
Right.
I think demographically, younger people, kids are more likely to be asymptomatic than older people. But I just wonder, if there's no real testing going on in any large scale way, are there a lot of asymptomatic people who are the coaches that are out there in the summertime? Are they in their 20s, 30s, 40s, lower at risk? And then, so I'm a 65-year-old teacher in the school system. I'm higher at risk. The asymptomatic comes into the classroom, and then all of a sudden, so you see how it plays out.
Yeah, of course. But those kids go home.
But if they're asymptomatic, why would they go home?
Those kids go home after contests. They go home after practices to family members that aren't 12 and 15 and 18 years old.
Okay, so the likelihood is...
Yeah, so if indeed there was a greater viral spread, I think one could deduce that you would see more impact on our numbers through this period.
Okay.
Which, again, thank God has not been the case. And I certainly don't want to be perceived as cavalier about the approach here, because I just spoke earlier about how critical it is to wear masks outside of school, and you still have to be smart. Frankly, when I see kids engaged in athletics, they're supervised and tend to be better than when I see them not engaged. When I see kids walking down the street with, you know, a pack, not in you know, in something organized, they're just walking down the street. Oftentimes I'm disappointed to see that they don't have masks on or whatever. And that's not, you know, exclusive to Cheshire, by the way.
Right.
That's just kind of maybe demographic, you know, just that age. But, you know, when I see them participating in sports, they are pretty good about adhering to it. The same way we see them in school. They are very good about wearing the masks and the precautions they're taking. Maybe it's because they don't want to miss out on school. Maybe because they don't want to miss out on athletics. They're really pretty vigilant. Well, you know, I see it with our kids on the hockey coach that I team. Like I said, many of those kids are Cheshire residents. Shout out that they're at practice right now, actually. But, you know, I do think that for their mental and emotional well-being, we also have to calculate that in. But I think that medical experts, I'm not making that decision. Like that's not me that's swaying that. I just recognize that that's a variable for kids. I don't have the medical background to make that decision.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. I just, when I looked at these categorizations,
Yeah.
I did.
Like, how did you derive that, right? Is a fair
Yeah.
question.
It wasn't sports. I mean, I didn't see
Yeah,
the names
it's a
that
fair
made any
question.
sense to me. They had titles and stuff, and it wasn't
Sure.
sports. Like, I just don't get how you say football's this and soccer is this. Speaking to the fall season, because you have two people running downfield right next to each other for,
Right.
you know, it's not 15 minutes.
Right, right.
I just want, I would love to see some more information, just the criteria used in defining those things.
Yeah, ironically, if you talk to a football person like that strongly believes we should be playing football, they would tell you the same thing. Like, you know, what's different? Where's the data? What data do we have to be able to play football? Because the data is so favorable today. But, you know, at the end of the day, I would defer to the medical experts who made that decision. And I don't think it's a good idea to be playing football right now if they don't think it's a good idea. And I know that's what you're saying. You really, all of us, our first priority is to make sure kids receive a great education and do so in a way that's healthy and safe. You know, that they've deemed the healthy and safe piece around athletics, and I think that's a critical part of education.
So what I recommend, so I you know, Jeff, you mentioned October 1st being sometime between now and then as you gather more information about the club sports. I certainly follow the experts' medical advice. You know, obviously the direction for Chesapeake has been getting and amount of control procedures. I'm not really worried about that. But I think just for transparency for the community,
Mhm.
you know, I'm sure just as there were, you know, unfortunately football players wanting to play this week that couldn't, there's probably other club folks saying, I can't wait to get together with my group next week.
Yeah,
or 2 weeks.
robotics or wherever.
Is a way to get the board. And again, it's what might be opened up versus, I guess, it lists everything that we have, clubs,
Sure.
intramurals. I know we had that somewhere. We brought up at the finance committee
yeah.
a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But it's a way to, you know, when you have enough information to categorize all that and say, here's what's going to happen, not going to happen. And at least
Sure.
get it to the board, because if we feel there's something on there we should talk about, we could try to get a meeting in. But if nothing else, you know, there's also an equity thing in all this too. You know, it's
Right.
parents out there that, hey, you know, at the time, why can't sports play? But my daughter not my daughter, but someone's daughter relies on
Yeah.
on a club activity after school for social well-being, can't. You know?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they're able to do that through
Virtual.
Yeah. So I don't know if we actually need a meeting next week, but I'll kind of see how things go with you, Jeff. If you feel there's enough information there that we should talk about some of these things, or at the very least, to send us an update where all these things are, where you think they're going to be next October.
Yeah, I didn't say we would start clubs on October 1st, to be
No.
clear, but that
And we
would evaluate around October 1st.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we have a board meeting on the 3rd. It's probably a good time to talk about.
Well, there's
Right,
one on the
third?
first open forum. We're going to talk about how to
Yeah,
do that
right.
one. But worst
Yeah,
case, we
it's-
can reuse that for something else.
Yeah, open forum would be difficult.
So I want to get to new business. It's starting to get to past 10 o'clock. We got 3 items in executive session. So is there anything else pressing on this superintendent's report? Could we please get out of the way quickly?
I just am wondering who is ultimately responsible for these, because I'm reading all the decisions. Is it DPH? Is it the governor? Is it us? Who makes the decision on it? Because I'm totally confused every day I pick up the paper.
Fair
Someone
question.
else needs to be getting-
I think it's who you ask. Like when it comes to football, the DPH has said CIC can make that decision. CIC has said, well, local districts can, you know, you go play football now if you want, but DPH is basically advised against it. And I've heard that some districts are saying, you know what, we're going to play. We don't care what you say. We're just going to go start our own league over here and go play. Now that could be bravado early. I don't know. I don't know of any formal announcement of that, but I've heard that. And so they're saying, you know, local district for football, but DPH is really the guidance that we use.
But for what it's worth, Faith, on our board chair list group that we have a Kate, I asked a question, you know, I have yet to hear from any board in any district that voted, the board themselves voted on sports or voted on taking action on any other activity relating to this. They all have deferred, at least with competitive sports, have deferred to the superintendent and the athletic directors to the guidance of DPH, CIAC, and Chesapeake. I haven't seen any boards, you know, formally vote on intramurals or clubs, et cetera. They tend to rely on, you know, the advice of superintendent, but the same folks, because, you know, if it's contact the local health district. So ultimately it's those experts that give input to us, the superintendent. And most boards have been letting the superintendent, you know, make the decision unless there's something very egregious there. So it just seems to change every day though, the input. So who knows what's going to happen next week on any of this stuff. I don't hold my breath. No problem. We have no old business, thankfully. We do have new business. We have an affirmation of our strategic goals. Now, we did this last July, before the new board took place. So just want to spend a few minutes on why we do this every year at this meeting. And then we can get into it. Any takers? Or there's nothing to talk about?
I mean, with respect to, we do have to develop a strategic goals on an annual basis per our policy. We have to affirm them on an annual basis, not develop them. Like I said earlier in the presentation, we designed these in 2011, designed to be run through 2021 or 2021. 10-year plan. As I said, this year, we hope to be changing those, or at least revisiting them for the future. So these will be kind of the last year of the plan, and we did clean them up a couple of years ago and really have been focusing on those two, because you saw all of them. You can't possibly name them all. Nobody could tell you what our strategic goals were. They can now. SEL and complex thinking, people don't forget it. So it's got to be something like that moving forward too, I think.
Yeah, I can't believe it's year 10.
Yeah, right?
So you're looking for
I am looking for a motion.
I would like to move that the Cheshire Board of Education reaffirms the Cheshire Public Schools strategic objectives and goals for 2020.
Thank you, Ann. Is there a second? Catherine seconds. Any discussion?
I just
Yes,
wanted to
Adam.
comment really quickly. And Catherine can refresh my memory. These are the same items that we spent a better part of a year on in 2019, right? We went
Yes.
through all of them line by line. So
Exactly.
a lot of we went through all these things, and we did make updates and tweak some words that we debated heavily on sometimes about the meanings of those. And so I think that what do we call them? The strategic objectives and goals are sound, and I think will serve our system well. So
Yeah, I think it was last July, the last updates were made. Tim,
Yeah.
So this is an annual thing?
It is.
Yes.
So we didn't look at it really at all this year, did we? Did it go through? No, because I'm on planning
No.
committee, so. Okay. No, you've been busy, I get that.
No.
What about?
No, we don't go through them because they're set like.
It was a
10 years ago,
10-year plan
Okay.
that it was
we updated them
established.
last July.
And so now this year, they basically expire,
Yeah.
and we will review them this year. And it'll be a stakeholder group that'll review them and make proposals for new goals moving forward.
And who sets that stakeholder group? Is it the board or you?
Historically, the superintendent has worked with trying to select and solicit, I should say.
Sure, you gotta find volunteers. It's not easy.
Yeah, well, right now it's really tough for that stuff.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but we'll hopefully get, like I said earlier, clearer water and be able to focus on this.
Okay, right now it's kind of on autopilot.
Correct.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So, any other questions? Seeing as there are no other questions, the motion is move the Cheshire Board of Education reaffirms the Cheshire Public Schools strategic objectives and goals for 2020, 2021. All those in favor? Thank you. It is unanimous. I have no update. As far as upcoming meetings, we usually have an open forum meeting in the fall. We have one tentatively scheduled October 1st, 2020. It's marked as TBD because we're not sure how we're going to have, it usually it's a public open forum. We talk about various committee topics, finance, planning, et cetera, here, usually in town council chambers. Not sure how we're going to do that with COVID. So I'm not sure that means it's going to happen, but I'll work with the board and superintendent, see what we could try to do. Worst case, we'll repurpose that meeting for something else if needed, or try to find an alternate way to do an open forum. I think that's sometime this year. October 6th, 2020, there's a policy committee meeting at 6:30 p.m. Will be virtual. October 15th is the next Board of Education business meeting, 7:30 p.m. here in Town Council Chambers. October 19th, 2020 is a curriculum committee meeting at 7 p.m. And it'll be virtually over YouTube channel. I do have a motion to adjourn the executive session. I move that the meeting be adjourned into executive session to include Dr. Solon, Mr. Massiana, Ms. Solano to discuss union negotiations with no action to follow. Is there a second? Actually, Ann beat both of you. Ann seconds. All those in favor? Thank you. We will be adjourning the executive session. There will be no action to follow, hence there will be no follow-up meeting. For those of you watching this evening, thank you so much for sticking through this. Hopefully, you got a lot of good information at the beginning of the meeting on the reopening and some COVID concerns. Please contact us via the COVID email if you have any further questions, and be happy to get back to you all. So we're going to go dark at this point.